It is Sunday, the 1st of November, and I'm fresh back from a very powerful, very invigorating freedom rally in Birmingham city centre yesterday. More of that towards the end of the video. Well, the psychopaths just will not stop, will they? They're getting more blatant, more audacious, more obvious with every passing day. So just yesterday, we got the announcement in the UK that England is to join Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland by going back into another full lockdown, which, lest we forget, is a term that comes out of the prison industry. Tells you a lot. So this announcement came yesterday from the treacherous, traitor, sellout Boris Johnson on a Saturday evening. When have you ever known politicians to work on a Saturday? And if the announcement really did have to be made yesterday, why was it not made during the day? Why was it made instead after dark in the evening? Well, yesterday was Halloween, the festival of Samhain. I know I've got the pronunciation of that wrong, but going back to, the pagan world, the original festival of this time of year. These dates on which these measures are announced are never by accident. So look at what he said. The restrictions are due to come in from Thursday. What date is it this coming Thursday? That would be the 5th of November then, a date historically associated in Britain with the overthrow of treason and the taking back of freedoms from tyrannical institutions. So the irony of further rights and freedoms being taken away from us on a date historically associated with the overthrow of all of that is, again, no accident. Yesterday, as well as being Halloween, was also a blue full moon. And many people have told me that this was a very powerful phenomenon which resonated much positivity to be tapped into by humanity. So instead of enhancing that positivity and all the potential that it holds, we instead had an announcement that pissed off the entire country and dropped everyone down into low-density, negative, vibratory emotion of fear, anxiety, resentment, all of this. That, again, would have been calculated, would have been done by design. Interesting that yesterday, as well as being Halloween, was also the birthday of Jimmy Savile. I think we know enough about him to not have to recap on this video. And also yesterday we got the announcement of the death of Sean Connery. Best known, of course, for playing James Bond, Agent 007. So interesting numbers there. There's the 7. He died at the age of 90, so we've got a 9 there. And all these numbers have significance in terms of the way things are presented to us. It's all numerology and symbology, which is the way these dark occultists work. I'm not talking about the likes of Johnson and Hancock being practitioners of this. They're the mere stooges, but those above them in the hierarchy know exactly what they're doing with these ritualistic practices, and it's always right there in the dates. And we can see this all along through this scamdemic narrative. So first of all, when were the initial announcements made of nations going into lockdown as a result of the pandemic, which wasn't one? Well, that would have been at the time of the spring equinox, around about the 21st, 22nd of March. Then we had the second set of fierce lockdowns announced for the UK exactly 6 months later, round about the autumn equinox, 21st, 22nd, 23rd of September. Look at the date on which masks were first mandated on public transport in the UK. That would have been the 15th of June. What's the significance of the 15th of June in history? That was the date in 1215 in which the Magna Carta was signed into being. The English Constitution, all about protecting our natural-born rights and freedoms. And what happens? We get them taken away by this dictate being passed on that day. There were 2 other dates on which masks were mandated in public places, in stores, and then later in all kinds of public indoor spaces. The first date was the 24th of July, which is 24/7. 24/7 is common talk for something that happens perpetually, all the time, without stop. So we have some symbolism there that the masks have been brought in and they're intended to be there the whole time. The second date on which this was brought in was the 8th of August. So that's the 8th of the 8th, 8-8. 8 is a figure associated with the concept of infinity, something that never ends. Again, we get the same idea there. So all along, we're getting satanic mockery, and we're getting our faces rubbed in it, because the occultists, the practitioners, the architects of this narrative know that the vast majority of the general public will have no concept of these ideas. They won't spot the patterns, they won't realise the significance of the numbers or the symbolism, and they're having a big laugh at our expense. And the latest example of that was yesterday, Halloween, these new examples, these new measures being announced, and they come into being on the 5th of November. Interesting that that is 2 days after the all-important American election on the 3rd of November. And I think it's no exaggeration to say that this will be the most important election in American political history, and indeed with ramifications for the whole world, no matter what your stance is on the two candidates concerned. We'll get some more into that. So never mind pump up the volume, it's more a case of pump up the tyranny. And all of this is being dropped on us in spite of and in the face of all these different methods of pushback and resistance which are now happening. So the protest events are growing in number, more and more of them happening, more and more people taken to the streets, making that clear and direct statement that some of us do not consent to our own slavery, some of us can see through the lies, some of us can think for ourselves, and some of us are not complying with the tyranny. We've also got these legal cases that are going through the court system. There's Simon Dolan with his Keep Britain Free case, which is putting through the traditional court system. I gather he's getting some progress with that, although the whole thing is being dragged out interminably and is being stretched out forever. Then you've got Michael O'Byrne-Sia. I did the podcast on this a couple of weeks ago. He's taken out the private criminal prosecutions against all British MPs, and that's going through the common law system. And I gather he's getting some progress with that. His latest posting indicated that British MPs are very close to being placed under house arrest as a result of their voting for the extension of the treasonous Coronavirus Act 2020. And it's actually the case that these new lockdown restrictions that are said to be coming in on Thursday, the 5th of November, only happen if they're voted for by MPs. That's due to go to the vote on Wednesday. So there's still the faint possibility that enough of these MPs, in their mass numbers, will vote against these restrictions and prevent them from coming in. I guess it depends on how much they've been shook up by the prospect of them being held personally accountable for the decisions that they make. They have one last opportunity for right action to stand on the right side in this battle of good and evil. You've also got the Rainer Fulmich case, the German lawyer that's assembled a legal team to hold the governments of the world accountable for all the damage and the harm that their coronavirus restrictions have caused. So even in the face of all of this, we're still getting everything ramped up. It's as if the government is just not only not listening to what all these different parties are saying, not only paying attention to what's being brought against them, but they're acting in defiance of it and laughing in the face of it and just sticking up two fingers to everyone that comes at them with any form of resistance. And you do have to wonder, at this stage in the game, with how blatant it now all is, whether, first of all, we are indeed being made to wake up to what's going on. And all of this is being done deliberately so as to alert large numbers of people in the general public to the criminal and corrupt nature of their governments and the fact that this whole COVID shit show has been the monumental scam that I and many, many others have been calling it out as being for the past several months. Have you noticed we're not getting called conspiracy theorists anymore? Interesting that. Prior to this year, we were called tinfoil hat wearing nut jobs by all the people that are walking around now in face nappies, of course, and complying with tyrannical dictates. We were called conspiracy theorists and nut jobs and batshit crazy. I've had very few of those accusations levelled at me this year. Could it be that everything we've been talking about, myself and many, many fellow researchers and video makers over the years, could it be that we were actually onto something? And could the fact that we're not now getting called all these triggering names be down to a mass recognition of the fact that we may have actually had a point and that people perhaps should have listened to us a little bit sooner before our society got into the state that it currently is? Anyway, you do have to wonder if all of this is being done to wake us up. This is consistent with the idea that there are other forces in control now, forces that want the upliftment and the progression and the improvement of humanity and society, forces for good, if you like. I'm not saying this is definitely the case, because still there's not enough evidence and proof to be able to make that decision 100%. But it is a possibility that I'm considering, because the way we're seeing these governments act in being absolutely outrageously, absurdly, ridiculously tyrannical and making it so obvious that there's so much more going on here than some virus. It's consistent with the idea that they are being directed and they're being controlled and they're being made to do all this stuff. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that these governments are deliberately acting the way they are again and exposing themselves and letting their true nature be known so that they will eventually be brought down and the current governmental systems we have will collapse to be replaced with something else. There's been a lot of talk about the Great Reset coming out of the World Economic Forum, replacing the current financial system that we have. And there have been different proposals for new political systems and different ways of organising society. So another possibility is that the control system that's been in place for a very long time, that whole infrastructure, is being deliberately brought down in front of our eyes to be replaced by something else, which will merely be another expression of the New World Order control system master plan. That is a possibility that I don't like to entertain. It's one that obviously we would not want to see come into place, but it is one that I guess we have to keep in the back of our minds for now as an alternative to the first suggestion as to what could possibly be going on here. Either way, the American election is now a matter of hours away, and so much swings on it, I would suggest. I've made the statement many, many times that this whole COVID scam is in very large part all to do with the Trump versus Biden all-important election on the 3rd of November. So very soon we're going to see how all that pans out, and very soon we're going to see what lies in the wake of it. In particular, for those of us here in Britain, whether these new lockdown restrictions come into place as they're said to be on the 5th of November, and what difference the result of that US election will make to the situation in countries all around the world. I have a sneaky feeling that whatever the case, this virus is going to start to disappear as if by magic, as if by some miracle, very soon after this election. I just have that instinctive feeling that it's going to be on the wane, and that by the springtime we're going to be told that we've beaten the coronavirus. Gotta hope so, eh? Just as a by the by, the main difference between this lockdown and the last one back in the spring is that this time the schools are being left open. And it's clear the only reason this is being done is because of what was uncovered by Simon Dolan's KBF legal case against the government, where during the course of the legal process it emerged that the government never actually ordered or instructed schools to shut down. In their own words, they issued guidance or recommendations, and that's the case with all these supposedly mandated things, like the wearing of masks. They're all just guidance, meaning they're not law in any sense of the word. So when the KBF legal case kicked up the fuss about the schools, the government tried to defend itself by saying we never actually instructed them to shut down. It was a voluntary thing. So you notice this time they're not saying the schools have to shut down because they realise they can't enforce it. And that is the case with so much else as well, if people only realise this. You see the deceptive lengths that these criminals will go to. They're just liars, criminals, thieves, and so much more. So we got the 5th of November, the Guy Fawkes symbolism, waiting to play out any day now. It really feels like the final scene from V for Vendetta is waiting to come into reality. Wouldn't that be a thing? And interesting that in the narrative to that movie, society was tricked into accepting that there was a fake virus, a bogus pandemic. Plenty of parallels there with that movie and what we're seeing acting out now. Another aspect of the symbolism that I really want to draw attention to, I mentioned this in a podcast interview that I did in the week, is the fact that, I was saying a short while ago about how blatant and obvious everything is now being made, so that even the most calcified normie, the most ardent BBC News believer, has to accept that something is not quite right about this, has to accept that we're not being told the whole story here. It's as if the architects have gone out of their way to make everything as ridiculous and as absurd as they possibly can. Scenes from supermarkets in Wales where non-essential goods, these products that are deemed to be non-essential, have been cordoned off in the aisles. They've got bits of tape over them. So this is stationery, it's greetings cards, it's Christmas present material, it's warm clothes for your kids as the winter comes in. People are being told they can't buy these. And people are really buying that this is because of a virus, that if you spend an extra 5 minutes in the children's clothes aisle of the supermarket, you're somehow going to spread this thing in a way that you wouldn't if you just stuck to essential food and drink. It's just being made so ridiculous. And on that note, over the past week, we actually had the story in all seriousness. They're asking us to believe this, that they've started testing samples of sewage to see whether they show signs of the genetic material of this virus having been shed into the sewage. They're going down in sewers and they're testing what they find there. If this isn't a blatant, symbolic, coded way of letting people know that this whole thing is a monumental shit show, then I don't know what else it would take. And this ties into what we had in the very early days of lockdown. When they were first announced, we were told that toilet roll was flying off the shelves in supermarkets. People were panic buying the bog roll. What was really happening is that the manufacturers and the wholesalers were keeping this stuff back. They were creating scarcity-based mind control. They were creating the impression that, oh my God, we might not be able to get enough toilet roll, and causing that panic among people. But that would be another way of them communicating through satanic mockery again, because they've got this morbid, warped, twisted sense of dark humour, that the whole thing is a shit show. They're telling you, this is a load of shit. That's why all the bog roll has disappeared. So it's not as if we haven't been told every step of the way what is going on here. Another thing I keep saying, besides we'll know soon enough how everything's going to pan out, is that whatever the case, those of us that want to stand on the side of right action, that need to make our contribution to these monumental times, cannot let up our efforts 1 inch. We have to keep our activism and our participation stepped up 100% throughout. We have to keep doing everything that we always would have done, lockdown or no lockdown. So we'll find out whether these new restrictions come in. If they do, how about everyone this time around just refuses to comply? They carry on going out, carry on going to work, carry on seeing friends, carry on socialising, carry on going around other people's houses, carry on their regular daily business the same way they always would. What if all these businesses that have been ordered to close just refuse to do so in their mass numbers? Look at the example we had with the gyms in Liverpool the other week, where they actually achieved the victory of all the gyms being allowed to stay open, all triggered by one of these businesses taking the initiative, taking the stand and saying, I'm not going to close. And then the other gyms stood in solidarity with this business and they achieved that victory for themselves. How about we do that on a mass basis throughout the land? Just simply refuse to comply with this tyranny, because we know now it's far enough down the line. We've got enough information to know that this is nothing about any virus. It never was. And more people realise this now. So at this stage in the game, they're going to manipulate the numbers anyway. If they decide to tell us that cases are through the roof and infection rates are soaring, they're just going to do that. They don't need genuine data. They just invent the stuff. They're always going to do what they want to do. So this time round, we need to send a clear and direct message to them that we're just not having it. None of us. We're not going to comply. What would they do then? There's not enough of them to police and enforce it, but there are plenty of us. It's always been a numbers game, and it's always been ridiculous how few of these tyrants and their foot soldiers, their stooges, their order followers are controlling how many of us. And that's another thing. The police and all the individuals that are tasked with enforcing these so-called guidelines, these so-called rules, like the COVID marshals, these cockwombles, with their fluorescent jackets, given all this power, becoming jumped up little tyrants and loving it because they finally got some authority in their miserable lives. What are these people thinking? They and their families and their children are going to have to live in the nightmare society that they're helping to bring in. Without their complicity, without their cooperation, there goes the agenda. I've said this a million times, but clearly it still needs saying. So how about we just don't conform this time round? And we don't accept what they're trying to take away from us. Wouldn't that make a difference to how things pan out? I'm back on YouTube, as if you're watching this on YouTube, you will have noticed. This video will also go on my BitChute. I did get a 2-week ban from YouTube for the crime of telling the truth. I put up a video with admittedly a couple of provocative trigger words in the title. I know better than that now, so I'll be watching the titles of my videos very carefully. Otherwise, the AI bots that have been trained to pick up on certain words will be taking it down. So, for instance, at the Birmingham rally yesterday, there was a well-known author, speaker, researcher whose first name is David, but I'm not going to mention his second name because mentioning that name alone seems to get you taken down from YouTube these days. I met a guy called Peter at the rally yesterday, and he's been in contact with me by email. He's hit upon the great idea of downloading the content of many prominent truth researchers in these times. He's created a huge archive of videos that he's lifted from YouTube, so that if these channels ever go down, and we're seeing this happening more and more by the week, there's a very strong chance that all this type of material will disappear from the web in due course. But this guy has been diligently downloading and storing all of these videos on a huge archive, so that if that happens, they're ready and waiting there to be burnt to DVDs, to be put on memory sticks, or to be re-uploaded to the web, whatever the case. So we all need to be doing this, saving information offline so that it's readily accessible should the worst happen, should we get these 10 days of darkness or anything along those lines. So that's a great idea for everyone to do. I do have a library TV channel now, library.tv. All my YouTube videos have been brought across to that, so it's a duplication of my YouTube channel. If they do take down the YouTube channel, I imagine that the videos would disappear from library as well, in which case it is back to BitChute, but the BitChute account is still being maintained. Just a reminder about my one-stop shop new website as well, put together by this awesome guy in the States that reached out to me and offered to become my webmaster. Big respect to Eric out there. He's done a great job. The website is at djmarkdevlin.com, and that is the portal for all of my videos, all my podcasts, and all of my output, all there in one place. This past week, I did a video podcast for Save Our Rights UK with Vincent Dunmore. That's up online now. We had a great conversation there. I've got conversations to unleash soon with Clive de Carle, talking about natural health and how to fortify and sustain yourself at times of heightened anxiety and stress. I've got one with Andrew Johnson of Check the Evidence UK. Had a few audio issues with that, which I still need to sort out, but that'll be released in a few days. I'm looking to get some new interviews with some very key people talking about what's happening in the coming days. We have got an interesting week ahead with the American election looming in about 48 hours from now, or slightly longer. And then we're going to see what the result of that vote is from the MPs on Wednesday. and we're going to see what happens with this Michael O'Byrne private criminal prosecution case. At the moment, things seem to be looking good in terms of how that's progressing. So in the Hancock, Whitty, Johnson and Vallance households, there may well be no need for any laxative at this point. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. There are some freedom rallies, some protest events planned for November, and as far as I'm concerned, they're absolutely still going ahead, and I'm absolutely going to be at the ones that I always was. I'm not going to change my behaviour this next month one iota. I'm going to continue to live freely, or as freely as I'm able, and I'm going to continue to do all the things I choose to do in life, while causing no harm to another, because that is the number one right in creation under natural law. Do no harm, live freely, and no one has the right to try and take away those rights and freedoms from you so long as you're causing no harm, damage or loss to another. So I'll leave it on that note. I'm going to play out with a recording of my speech at the Birmingham Freedom Rally in Victoria Square yesterday afternoon. It was a wonderful event, great energy, loads of amazing speakers. I'm sure there's footage of many of the other speakers kicking around online, but this is how I went down in Birmingham yesterday. Catch you again soon.
Without further ado, here's Mark Devlin.
Mark Devlin in the house! Share. Go to the Ultimate David I Sharing Squad. You need to share click share, start watch live, share it in that group.
Thanks
Let's
to
go.
everyone for tuning in today. The best use of your time. It is no exaggeration to say that we are now standing at the most pivotal point in human history. And our generation is the one that bears the responsibility for determining where things go from here. There are two timelines waiting to play out. Down one lies an absolute dystopian nightmare of the type you've seen in movies for decades.
David, I will be live
all
on
our
this
rights and
video.
freedoms are taken away.
We are going live all the way.
Rampant. All justified by a virus that probably doesn't even exist.
Come on, get the watch parties going. I need this up to 500, 1,000 at least for when I come on. You need to be sharing this, guys.
Down the
Even
other
harder.
timeline.
Keep sharing until you're banned from sharing.
Freedom, truth, justice, and love.
Share like you've never shared before. Tag
And
your
in the
friends.
same way that there's two timelines, there's only two teams here.
Tag your friends.
There's only two sides to be on. And the time has come for everyone to choose a side. One side is collaborating with evil and tyranny. I'm sorry to say, all those people that are obeying immoral government dictates, that are putting a mask on when they're told to, that are shutting down their businesses when they're told to, that are preventing people coming into their homes when they're told to, are complying with this slavery. There's no virtue in that. I'm sorry to say, all the police officers that are enforcing all these draconian rules are also siding with evil, because without their complicity, without their cooperation, none of this could get put into physical manifestation. There are two sides. Everyone has to pick a side, and it will be remembered which side everyone chose when all this is over.
Remember the 5th of November.
I want to read out some song lyrics. You know, being a music man, this is a song that very few people have probably heard of, but the lyrics really speak to this occasion. And it's a record that came out in the 1960s, kind of a folk record by Ewan McCall, father of Kirsty McCall, and Peggy Seeger. And the song was called The Ballad of Accounting. Not accounting like, you know, accounting in an office, but accounting for what you did with the opportunities that were afforded to you in life. So imagine it's your last day of life and you're looking back on what you made of the circumstances and the opportunities that were available to you. You know, we hear from many spiritual mediums that when we pass over, we undergo a life review where everything we ever did is flashed before us. Can you imagine what Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock's live reviews are going to look like? Or Bill Gates? Worse than the most extreme horror movie you've ever seen.
Share,
anyway,
share.
let me read out.
If you share it as a share army, you're going to help another 20 people get here.
They're going to resonate with people here.
100 of you do that, we've got thousands.
We wandered through our days as if they would never end. All of us imagined we had endless time to spend. We hardly saw the crossroads and small attention gave to landmarks on the journey from the cradle to the grave. Did you alter the face of the city? Make any change in the world you found? Or did you observe all the warnings? Did you read the trespass notices? Did you keep off the grass? Did you shuffle up the pavements just to let your betters pass? Did you learn to keep your mouth shut? Were you seen but never heard? Did you learn to be obedient and jump to at a word? Did you stand aside and let them choose while you took second best? Did you let them skim the cream off?
David, I give in the house. It's official.
Did you settle for the shoddy? And did you think it right to let them rob you left and right and never make a fight? Never make a fight. So that's what the Ballad of Accounting is all about. There are only two teams. Everyone needs to pick one. And when all this is over, it will be remembered which side everyone came down on. There are only two sides, and only one is going to win. And it ain't going to be tyranny and evil. It's going to be truth and freedom. Justice, love. So basically, it's Team God. Team God wins. We will win. Thank you. Short and sweet.
Short, sweet, keep it simple.
Ladies and gentlemen,
One,
I think
two,
you're a
three,
really awesome man, awesome message. Let's hear it one more time for him, please.
Big up Mike Devlin, come on everybody!
Thank you very much, Robert. So,
Can I hear you on there? I want to hear flipping clapping.